If Prime Minister Netanyahu's current coalition remains in power after the war begins to wind down and continues to pursue dangerous and inflammatory policies that test existing U.S. standards for assistance, then the United States will have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israeli policy by using our leverage to change the present course.
Senator Schumer is a staunch defender of Israel and the highest ranking.
He's just saying this to protect the Democrats back in the elections. Whatever they say has nothing to do with what they do. We've already given them close to $6 billion worth of military aid since October 7th.
African citizens, they will face prosecution if they serve in the Israeli military as it commits war crimes in Gaza. Condor said, when you come home, we're going to arrest you. Here in New York, over 100 activists were arrested Thursday after occupying the lobby of the New York Times in the latest protest against the paper's coverage of Israel's war on Gaza. One man was filmed harassing a group of protesters and ripping away a
Hook them up the air. Ooh. That's pretty interesting. But, you know, you guys have been asleep forever. Let's hear this.
To keep up with what's on the shelf and get hot in Trump campaign cream. Crucial for Ukraine. As NPR's Michelle Kalman reports, the official's been urging
in this country, from Birmingham to Bethlehem, I think is an amazing sort of slogan to put it together, because Birmingham is the crucible of the civil rights movement, and Bethlehem is the crucible in many ways of the liberation theology tradition that the civil rights movement was based on. And to see these abuses, this apartheid, this occupation happening in historic Palestine, creating a strong cultural connection and reality to that history and that rhythm and that spirit of the Black liberation movement, the Palestinian liberation movement, organizationally and at the grassroots, because it speaks to the similarities of the struggle. It speaks to the similarities of the reasons why we're both in oppressed situations. It speaks to the reality of the world today.
That's Eugene per year, and this is Alternative Radio. I'm David Bassamyan. This edition of AR features Eugene per year, from Birmingham to Bethlehem, part one of a special two-part program. From Birmingham to Bethlehem, two iconic places saturated with meaning. As segregation and Jim Crow were described as intractable, so too is Palestine today. How can the Palestinian struggle for freedom and dignity take lessons from the Black liberation movement? Historical circumstances are clearly different, yet there are similarities. Both are located in a colonial-like situation where a powerful oppressor dominates another less powerful group. Racism is a major factor. The Black liberation movement and Malcolm X's eloquent voice and militant politics resonate with Palestinians struggling for their freedom. Liberation struggles are not easy. Resistance to change is entrenched. Power does not readily give up its prerogatives. Our guest today is Eugene per year. He's a journalist, activist, and public speaker. He's a founding member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And he's the host and producer of Breakthrough News.
I've actually talked about Black Palestinian solidarity many times before during Black History Month over the years, but it's never felt so poignant as our current moment. And it's a long history, and it's a deep history, and it has deep connections to the undercurrents of both struggles, what they're really both about in their core essence. Two oppressed people trying to find a way to overcome their neo-colonial, colonial overlords who have imposed upon them for decades, and in the case of the Black Liberation Movement, centuries, a certain form of living and denied their humanity, denied its reality. And when you start to look at the history of Black Palestinian solidarity, it's interesting to see how it starts to come to be in a major way. I mean, one of the most major figures talked about today in Black History Month is always Malcolm X, right? Well, Malcolm X was really one of the first individuals to try to build a strong bridge between the Palestinian liberation movement and the Black liberation movement in an organized sense. And it was part of his own development, of his own consciousness, as he starts to move in beyond the Nation of Islam. He starts to become an independent activist. He forms the Organization of African Unity, Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and he's trying to establish a different sense of what Black politics really means. And his basic understanding was that the situation of Black people in America was that of an internal colony, a nation within a nation, that the struggle of Black people was for liberation. It wasn't a struggle for democratic pluralism, that Black people were excluded from the body politic on purpose, that they were not allowed to ascend into the political structure in any significant way on purpose. It wasn't just a holdover of something that happened 300 or 400 years before, although that is where it started. His understanding was that there was a very particular reason why Black people in America were are disproportionately at the bottom of everything, which continues to be true today. It's an amazing thing when you think about it, really. I mean, poverty, unemployment, diabetes, hypertension, people being killed by the police, people going to jail. We could go on probably all night and just talk about that. If it's bad, it's disproportionately Black and indigenous. And that, of course, is because of the roots of what brought us to this point. Ultimately, you had a situation in the United States, or at that time, previously the United States, the colonies, whatever you want to call them, at that moment, where those enterprises were more or less failed institutions. They thought they were going to come here and they were going to do a lot. It wasn't working out. People were dying, people were leaving. They had to try to find a way to create a certain level of dynamism, and they're searching for this, they're searching for that. I mean, the whole reason they came here originally, or at least, some of them, I guess, to escape, religious X, Y, and Z, but a lot of people thought they were going to find gold. And that's why they thought it was going to be, very lucrative for them. This is actually why Columbus even came in this direction, the original point. But that being said, they thought similar like the British colonies, like the Spanish, they'd find some natural resources and that would help them. Didn't work out, or maybe they'd find some other, furs, different pieces like that. Wasn't really a major industry, but they were able to figure something out over time, and that was they figured out how to deal drugs. And I say that very directly because ultimately the narrative of how you describe something determines ultimately how you view it. And of course, in our civics class version of American history, it was freedom, justice, democracy, all these different things, which didn't really exist in any significant way at the time. But if that's the narrative of what took place, it gives you a very different framing for the reality of how and why the country was founded. But ultimately, what gave the dynamism to what would become the United States was the fact that, at least initially, they found sugar and tobacco. Now, sugar, of course, and this maybe tells you something too. We don't even think about it as a drug now because it's in everything. Sugar's all over the place. But as I've said a few times before, anyone here who's a parent, there's a reason why you don't constantly give your kids cookies. Because you understand not only the impact on their health, but also the fact that it starts to, it builds on itself, that it becomes an addiction, and it starts to become something that you have to have all the time. And ultimately, all these products, Coke, Pepsi, Oreos, or whatever, everything around us, even the coffee industry, are really based on this. So we can see it even in our own lives today and in the way that it operates. But certainly then, it was a little bit more of a revelation. Because back then, many people in Europe did not have access to sugar. It was like a luxury good. And this was the first opportunity that, other people had the opportunity to have a little bit of a sugar high, if you will, in their daily lives. Same thing with tobacco. You smoke it, you get high. This is just out of feudalism Europe. It's not like people are living high quality lives by and large. So if you can drink a little something, smoke a little something, and feel a little bit more calm, you can see that there's a certain value in that. And it creates a constantly expanding market. And in the context of that, you have to find a way to get people to work, to continue to grow the way you're doing these crops, these plantations in different pieces. And they had a lot of different ideas about how that could potentially take place. The indigenous people, they were first going to try to enslave them. Didn't work out the way they expected. Not only did the indigenous people resist, but, listen, this was their land, their territory. The people who lived there were like them. So it was much easier for them to run away, in addition to just straight up resistance. You enslaved me, you put me here, you say you're working here, well, I go 50 miles away. Who's going to know the difference? Who's going to be able to find me? So that doesn't work, right off the bat. They didn't say, well, let's get indentured servants over here. We got a lot of poor, destitute people in Europe. A lot of them were putting in prisons, debtor prisons, by the way. Georgia, the state of Georgia, it's an interesting fact maybe that you'd be curious in. The whole basis of Georgia was to bring poor whites out of debtors' prisons to keep a buffer between Florida and South Carolina, because the Spanish were allowing escaped slaves from South Carolina to form a militia and go and raid the slave plantations in South Carolina and free the slaves and create a lot of damage.
Was the bottom line of the Second Amendment right there.
We're going to tell them a good story, a good song. You come for 10 years, 20 years, you get a little bit of land, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. All of that also false. And, a lot of times people died before the term was up because the conditions of existence were so bad. A lot of times you would get here and you're here now, so what are you going to do? And they would just say, oh, well, it's had 10 years, but look, we gave you food, we gave you this, we gave you that. Becomes almost a form of kind of perpetual slavery. And some of the early
feel that way. That's what your indentured servant in a factory.
Even bigger problem.
Working at the supermarket. In the medical center.
Indigenous people who were trying to defend their land and carve out their own existence in this new reality, with all these people coming from Europe trying to kill them and destroy them in every possible way. You've got a number of very angry individuals who've been brought to the country allegedly as servants, but they're basically in a form of servants, almost slavery in a sense. And they're certainly not getting anything like what they thought they were going to get when they were sold a bill of goods and put over here. And then they start to work together. And they figure, well, there's more of us than these plantation owners and these others that are going on, so we can wage our own form of resistance. So now you got the opposite problem of what you were hoping for. You wanted a stable labor force, but you got a bunch of angry people who would rather overthrow you and find a way to live amongst themselves without you, and they're not really concerned about your plans and the budding industries that you're bringing forth, insurance, shipping. It's just, you hear it a lot when you talk about black reparations, but it's true. You can easily find it. There would be no banking and finance. Like, why are there deep capital markets in America? Slavery, 100%. Why do you have all this massive insurance industry? Slavery, 100%. The modern timber industry, we could be here all night talking about that. But
and that slavery still exists. We are slaves.
This is the genesis of African slavery.
Capitalism, slavery.
Because they figured we have to find some group of people who we can get over here and make work to keep this expanding economy going, but we have to be able to control them. So you bring people from across the ocean, so you completely rip them away from their context, and you're not going to swim back. So what are you going to do? Once you're here, you're trapped. So you've got a captive people, a captive nation. You brought them from dozens of different people from all across the African continent. So that's just their entire social context, which means that they now have to band together, but since they're under your purview, you have more control over the language they speak, the religions they practice, all of these different pieces, so you're able to have a large amount of control, not just over their workforce, but their spiritual and cultural life, so you can break people's resistance. I mean, that's what it's really about. And then, of course, you pass the requisite laws, the first real laws that sort of bring in sort of start to bring in sort of what we might call segregation, color caste system, to really establish slavery. First, you cannot own funds. Second, you cannot own land. Third, you cannot have interracial marriages. So that way you preserve the ability to identify based on phenotype who people are, which is obviously a form of social control. You make sure they can't build up independent wealth because they have no land. And you make sure they can't defend themselves because they can't own firearms. So you have this overall system that becomes extremely profitable and actually becomes the pivot point for the rise of capitalism, not just in the United States, in the entire world. Haiti at the time of the Haitian Revolution was actually the most profitable corporation on earth.
And this is why Haiti is a basket case still today.
Or at that time, actually, the early United States, at that time. So it gives you a sense that this was really a huge economic pivot point to grow capitalism as a system. And then even when slavery was over, you have a country that says, well, listen, this was actually working really, really well for us. And it really is a great benefit to have a
That's
certain,
why law is based on
maybe minority,
just
but
for us.
numerically large group of individuals who we can pay basically nothing and treat very bad, and by that get sort of extra profits, extra money. It really can sort of juice our economy and allow us to go to even higher heights for this elite of capitalist individuals, which is why
Extraction,
it's a long story reconstruction
capitalist.
but nonetheless, you have this of capitalism. It's not an extra, it's not an alternative. It's why even though you've had a black president, you still have everything bad is disproportionately black. It's a feature, not a bug, of the U.S. capitalist system. So this is what Malcolm X was starting to try to bring to the struggle. He said our struggle is in some ways a struggle.
When Malcolm realized that there were close to 20% of the white poor people were just like black people. Their skin was just like me. I'm an African American. That's melanin chap.
Our struggle is, in his feeling, more akin to the colonized people of the world and those who are fighting against neo-colonialism.
And it still is that today. Go into any gentrified neighborhood
that we have. Their very own oppression and colonization
look at San Francisco.
The benefit
and
of
all the homeless in California.
Not the same people in America and Europe who really want to get rich by controlling really the whole world and by subjecting most of the colonized world to disproportionate forms of exploitation as every other quote unquote worker, farmer, peasant, or whatever. So somewhat similar to the United States. So in this understanding, one of the most important things for Malcolm X in terms of how the Black liberation movement is going to move forward is it has to look for its natural allies. It has to find the other anti-colonial, anti-imperialist forces around the world whose story is similar on a narrative level, of course, and you can talk all day about how similar your struggle is to the others, but it has the same enemy because it serves the same purpose. So he very quickly starts to move in many different directions, but one of the main directions he starts to move is towards, Middle East, West Asia, of what you might call then, because of course, Egypt under Nasser and what was happening with Algeria, with the Algerian liberation movement, all these different pieces, this area of the world was really a cradle for anti-colonial struggle and resistance. And of course, Malcolm X is also a Muslim, and so he's looking to go to the traditional areas, also the heartlands of Islam, and make close connections between the Islamic world and the Black liberation movement.
And that's what happened.
So in the context of this,
Thomas Merton,
bring him into
he was trying to bring all the religions of the world together.
He goes to Gaza in
under a
1964.
working class
jurist of Gaza. People, maybe you've seen the photo of Malcolm X shaking hands with Imam in Gaza. That was the top
assassinated
jurist, the top
by the
judge
CIA.
of Gaza at that time. He meets with the early leaders of the PLO, which becomes Foreign Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1964, and starts to forge ties with them as well. And obviously, the natural rhythm is clear because the nature of the Palestinian struggle is so similar. I mean, why is it? Why is it that Zionism is in this space? Because, when Zionism first started saying we need to create our own country somewhere, at first they were going to go to Uganda, believe it or not. They were also thinking about Argentina as well. For various reasons, they thought both of those, it's not really going to work the way we want it to work. And one being, and we can see this even now today, right? The narrative power of being able to connect to the stories of the Old Testament, the sort of historic reality of the Holy Land. It gives you sort of a narrative benefit there in terms of why you should be there and steal the land. And let's just be clear, the land is stolen. In 1948, when they start, they own 6% of the land. They wage a war, kill 15,000 people, expel 750,000 others. Then they own 78% of the land. Well, you stole the land. You didn't buy it. You took the majority of the land you didn't own. But why were they able to succeed is the real question. Because the desire of Zionism to have a homeland by picking this particular area of the world actually coincided with another very important motion. And that's in the post-World War I era, the desire of the British Empire to take over everything that had been controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Because the British Empire, you know, is the biggest empire. Rule Britannia. England rules the seas. The sun never sets on the British Empire. So they see a big opportunity after World War One, along with France, but mainly the British, to take over the former colonial territories of the Ottoman Empire in this case, but also Germany in other cases, in order to increase their own power. And it's an important element, because not only is this just generally for thousands of years, right? This is the crossroads of the world. But beyond that, you're starting to also see the emergence of oil as a commodity. So there's a lot of key things. You got the Suez Canal, which of course the British have been working since the mid 1800s to control. You got oil starting to emerge as a big issue here, but you have to be able to critically control the area. And again, this is the benefit of history and really going to the primary sources, because most of the Zionist leaders were very openly talking and writing about this at the time. They felt no compunction. But what they realized right away, and what they would say to themselves is, listen, we can never really survive in this area. Like, we're not going to be able to steal the land and be a decided minority from, hundreds of millions of people whose very aspiration at this time is to be free. I mean, why was it that you had a quote-unquote Arab revolt at that time? Because you had people who were looking to leverage the British against the Ottomans to free the Arab nations so they could, work on their own lives and improve their own situation. And so there's no way for Zionism to stay there and to say, like, yes, we're going to control this territory, unless, as they said, we have a real powerful friend. And you can't have a more powerful friend than the British Empire at that time. So, and America, of course, just stepped right into that space. So ultimately, these two things coincide. And the British, in the Balfour Declaration, and this is why we talk a lot about 1948, let's talk about 1917, 1918, 1919, 1920, and what the British did then. That's critically important to understand this. They say, okay, cool, sounds like a great idea to us. Because what they're saying to them is, look, if you back us, we will be the 100% backers of Britain and the West. I mean, this is the
Zionists say,
Western civilization against Asian
you back
barbarism.
us,
That's how they talk.
England, America,
now they say it's not racist.
we're
and it's
always going to be
Go read what they were saying
backing
at the time and tell me
whatever
it's not racist.
So
And
that's
you can see what's happening now. But just
you have to
look at
realize
how it
what's
started.
going on in Gaza
In
right
that
now is
context,
what England and
you
America
have
want.
the
They want
emergence
those
of this
people
moment where
out
the
of
British
there.
decide to
They
create
want
this space
Israel to
where you're going to have this
control
homeland.
all of the greater
So this is
Israel,
the identification
so they can then
that
force the rest of the
Malcolm X
Arabs to
and
do
the Israeli
exactly
Palestinian
what they
leaders
want.
are making amongst each other, because they're able to see the similarities, very different
We
stories.
will
in many
allow
ways,
Israel to
although
nuke
similar sort of players when
the
we're talking
Strip
about these
and
various
Lebanon.
imperial powers.
Right?
But they can
It
see
just
a
totally
very
takes
similarity about
that
how both
threat
sides
out,
ended
right?
up in a pretty
And
bad position.
nuke
That they basically
Iran
ended up there because
until
their
we
oppression
switch
was extremely
Iran, right?
profitable for
Back
someone
to
else.
what they
And
were
that
with
ultimately that someone else tended to be the same people. So that maybe if they found a way to get together against the common enemy, they could actually liberate themselves in a very profound way. Because as isolated struggles, it would be difficult to break out. It'd be easy to isolate. I mean, this is the essence of British imperialism, right? And all imperialism. The Romans used to say it: divide and conquer. That was their strategy. The British, when you read the colonial rule, it's actually interesting. If you want to ever do this research, you can go to London. You can go to all the colonial offices. Very well, the records, very well kept.
So that guy's pretty good. He's found on democracynow.org. His books, and go to Democracy Now. No, not Democracy Now. Don't go to democracynow.org because they're very good, but also go to David Bensignar's alternativeradio.org. Those two are really, really good sources, right? And let's see. This always happens.
Library boards are supporting their library first decade of this century. This is the period when Putin was really becoming powerful.
And Putin, you have to realize this whole geopolitical dance is a theatrical event. Putin works for the hidden hand. Hail Hydra, Why did he had 20 years to make a kerfuffle about what was promised Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union? Not 1 inch, right? And then all of the Baltic states, joined EU and NATO. He didn't say anything, right? He goes after teeny weeny little things, Moldova, Georgia. and then starts flirting because Ukraine of all of those were more Russian than any of the other Baltic states. The Baltic states were in the Soviet Union about 50 years or less before it collapsed, whereas Ukraine has been in the Soviet Union since it started, basically. So anyway, what do you have to do, right? So that guy, you have to have political and historical context. That guy on let's see.
And now I've got an attitude. I made the choice to not allow the Spirit to control my entire being. He said, be filled with the Spirit. Now, maybe you've never been guilty of those things, but your poor pastor has. But I made the choice. And I'll have to answer. If I'm filled with the Spirit, I won't have no trouble with the next one. But I need to be spiritually minded. Now, how are you minded? Well, if you're going to be math-minded, what do you have to do?
You got to know math.
Master math. If you're going to be history-minded, you got to master history. If you're going to be possible as that happens, we have rain showers possible as we get into the interesting thing of the chambers, which look like they are correlative to the subconscious. And the subconscious is not a Freudian concept.
He's talking about the Jewish temple
it actually
in
goes way
Palestine.
back to Augustine and earlier. It's in the scripture in a dozen places. I won't get into that debate here. We simply say you need to let the Holy Spirit help you clean out our closets. All of us.
So that is, here we are in the Easter period, 2 weeks to Easter. And our Islamic family is going through Ramadan, fasting. And our Catholic family is going through Lent. And this is the period that they both clean out their spiritual closet, right? But the rest of us, not so much, because when God's love is not your primary thought, when you're not thinking about God's love, you're thinking about what's on TV, what you're going to have for breakfast or lunch, that blowjob you're going to get when you go into that part of town, and you won't tell your wife, and but she knows. We're all psychic. We all know these things, right? And pretty much everyone in the world knows that what's going on in the Gaza is um, basically murder, but it's also going on in the United States. It's also going on in Haiti right now. It's also going on in Darfur. It's also going on all over Africa, Asia, India, and we all know this. And if unless you speak out about it, you are in sin, right? And if you go, oh, those Houthis, they went into Israel and killed 1,200 people. They're animals. Kill them. No. Would Jesus say that? No. Right? Jesus is still here watching what's going on. Jesus was here in the beginning. The Messiah was here, from the beginning. And everything was dark. And then it was light. Who was that light? It was that, luminescence, of Satan and Jesus. Actually, basically twins. One's incandescent and one's photonic. Jesus is photonic. Jesus and Satan is incandescent. So there's so much that's going on above you, underneath you, and right in front of you. And the movie The Matrix is all of these things that are given to us, like The Matrix and other movies and books and things that saying, hey, this is what's going on. They do a pretty good job at saying physically, there is the micro and macro. Macro is the big picture, Newton looked at the physical world and described it as a big machine. The micro is like way down in there, right where God lives. But God lives everywhere. And what are we doing with it? Not much, right? So yesterday, the last, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday, Saturday were beautiful days. I went a little bit on talking to you right now. It's not raining, but it's a rainy day. We had some really serious weather that kind of came in on the backside of. We're in this lucky spot, meaning normally the weather comes from the west and hits us, Tennessee, further down in the plains, and once it hits the Appalachian Mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains, it kind of makes the weather go either up to the north, up into Ohio Valley and New York State, and then New England, and then Canada, or it goes down south into Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and we we dodge the bullet mostly, right? But when we don't, woo, that's like when we got between Christmas and New Year's, or actually Valentine's Day, that period, we got a number of snowstorms where it was either 5 inches to 20 inches, and it was really super cold for 2 weeks, and that's when normally I would head for Florida, but I don't even have a car. I have no money. I live on $400 a week, and Social Services wants to cut that out too, right? And so I feel very blessed in that my life, back in the day, I had, I was doing 10, 20 things at once. I was a really distracted guy, but I was always in um, God's co-create. I did everything in love's co-creation, right? And that was my saving grace. And that was my, not almost, it was an unconscious thing, right? My unconscious co-creation of love, which always was there and was always in everything I did, and why I was so successful in whatever I did, is now gone from unconscious to conscious to consciousness. And consciousness is when you are love's co-creation. If you're a Christian, so I'm hanging with 3 different Christian churches, and this is what they constantly go on about. That, oh boy, we are it, right? God's our, just like the Jews, all of Abrahamic religions pretty much do this, and Christians, Judaism, there is the Orthodox, the Reformed, the super Orthodox, Ananists, and traditionalists, and so that's about and there are other little frames in there too. But Christianity, just the Southern Baptists, have 60,000 different sects, meaning 60,000 um, churches that represent themselves as a separate religion, a sect, right? A sect is a portion of whatever that cohort is, right? So there's all these Christians, and there's Methodists and Lutherans and Episcopalians and Catholics and Unitarians, and Unitarians are like, everyone thinks they're like, wow, they're going straight to hell because they don't believe in hell. Unitarian, there is no hell. God is love. We're all going to heaven. Well, if you are a person who steps way back and takes a look at this, you can see that, well, there's a good standing for that, because you have to realize that the Bible was like written by illiterate monkeys on a million typewriters, not being able to talk to each other. And it wasn't until Paul, who was the you know what's his name, Draper of the Madman advertising agency, that kind of pulled it all together, and realized, forget the Jews, let's go after everybody else. Everybody else is the Gentiles, right? So you know here it was, and then after him, he brought everything to Rome and put it on the plate, And just when the Romans were, having loads of fun and entertainment of killing the Christians in the big coliseums, their business plan of Roman basic paganism was falling apart. So they, Justine and Constantine and all those teens and their moms basically made the Roman Empire into the Holy Roman Empire. Then it kind of split. There was the Vatican, which was the old school pagans who had all the power and magic, and then the guys who went up to Constantinople got involved with the online. And the thing about Islam really did not, conquer through, cutting people's head. They weren't sure like the Romans, and they sure weren't like the Christians, the Spanish Inquisition. They weren't that. They would cruise into a neighborhood that was falling apart and said, "Listen, we're going to take care of this. We have a really." They're kind of like the Chinese. We have a real army, our own, so we can come in, protect you from your enemies, and inject a bunch of capital and bring new product lines in, and also new clients for what you got. How could you go say no to that? And you can still have your religion. You can still have your own traditions. You'll just have to pay a little tax on that. That's it, just a little tax. Whereas the Israelis, killed everyone. I mean, that's why they were conquered so many times, because they treated everyone so poorly. And God was saying, "Hey, stop this! This instant, you're not doing this in my name." And now they're doing the same thing over again. So in the no matter what's happening this second, it's what happens in the near future. The outcome, the expected and unexpected consequences. So when you're in spirit, when God is in your heart, when you are constantly being a slave to God's love, well, then you really don't. I don't have to worry. I'm in that space, and basically, God takes care of me. No matter, my car blew up and I can't go anywhere. And God said, "Don't worry about it. It'll work out," and it does. My friends lend me their beater every now and then, and whatever I need to go to the doctors, which my health. It's like people, they don't understand because it hasn't caught up to them yet. So I have to go into what is laughingly called the medical system in America, and only because I worked in it, understand it, that I can get what I need out of it. But they're constantly wanting to do multis, like big, you need heart, we got to crack you open. And I said, "No, you don't. I'm doing fine." And if, let's say, I were to have a heart attack or my heart exploded out of my body, so I'd be dead. It's no, I'm in my mid 70s. I've had an amazing life, more than any of you morons out there have done, because you're still stuck. There are a few of you who are kind of doing your dream. There are a few of you that are kind of listening to love's co-creation in your heart, and you're helping others, not yourself. There are a few of you out there where you realize it's the we and me, right? That's why it's not so much that YouTube is got the thumb on the scale here. No, it's because what I talk about is not what the general public wants to hear. And now, if I was talking about you're going to hell, God hates you, yeah, I'd probably, go viral. But I don't, because God loves us, right? Unconditionally. No matter what stupid crap we do, God loves everyone's going home, period. But between now and going home, it's up to us to have what kind of family, what kind of life, right? So that's why I go to three different churches. They are three totally separate folk, right? And I've been involved with them all for almost 2 years now, 18 months plus. And one is the Ku Klux Klan Southern Baptist. One is the I Own Everything Methodist. And God, why I'm so rich is because God loves me. And get off my lawn, And oh, you're hungry, you're cold. Oh, it's 40 degrees below zero. Get off my lawn. Instead of saying, "Come on in." Now, your average Muslim would invite that person in, heat him up, warm him up, give him some clothes, let him stay there, and then get him someplace else where he could step into a new life. Do we do that? No. Oh no, all the Christians do are whatever the least they can do to keep folk in their peace. They run homeless shelters. Now, I helped put together with a number of people a housing authority in New York City where we took over 50 buildings and housed 500 families. Right, and I was a master electrician. I had the license, I had the connections. That's an electrical joke. And so once everyone's, oh, we'll steal the electricity. No, no, we're going to put legal everything in these buildings, so when the marshal shows up, you can show them your electrical, your gas bill, which is the golden ticket to stay where you are. And once they did that, and we grew our own food, we had our own schools, we had our own healthcare, right? And that's why when I went back to I left New York City in '88, and when I went back in 2011, like Soho was like decimated. It's like there were all these 60-story condos. The beauty of Soho was that all the buildings were below 6 floors, and the light, and that whole area was an industrial area. Way before the revolution, it was New York City's heavy industry. It was like the Detroit of New York City. And so the buildings they built, in the 17th, 18th century, 19th century, were no higher than 6 floors. There was a good 200 feet between each building, and all the windows were gigantic because they had no electricity. At first, they had no gas even for lighting. And so they basically had sunlight. So that's why they didn't have really tall buildings to make shadow. So the sun in Soho on the streets, and all the avenues were wide. The streets were wide, like Green Street, Worcester, Thomas, Spring, Bank. All were streets that were um, like avenue size streets. West Broadway was double, the size of Fifth Avenue, right? Because it wanted sun, and so Bank Street had all the banks on it. Spring Street had all the springs, all of the good water coming out of the ground that you could drink and use for manufacturing, where you couldn't just use swill, right? So, and then they first put in gas, right, and then they brought in steam. Steam was because Edison's DC couldn't transmit electricity any further than 6 miles. So you could transmit steam a lot further. So they had the first big steam plant was on 16th Street, and it carried its steam all the way over. That was way on the east side on the East River, and it carried it all the way over to the west side to the Hudson River, and it went all the way from 16th Street down to the Battery and all the way up to 69th Street. And steam was everywhere. So if you see old New York City movies up until the 80s, 90s, and it's wintertime, you'll see steam everywhere because there was steam pipes in the ground. And so they had so much steam, they didn't just send it to, the places that were the electric generators, but they sold it to, apartment houses and to factories to run their machines. That was the first energy source before AC, right? So this is very indicative of what's going on right now. There are all kinds of amazing technologies that are out there. Tesla discovered zero point energy. So did Ben Franklin. So did Newton. Read their notes, right? They were all Masons. They were all, and people always go, well, why did Tesla, die poor? Well, he didn't die poor. He just didn't believe he needed, whatever he needed, he got because he was the golden goose, right? Up until the day he died, whatever he wanted to do. I mean, he was work. Why do you think Brookhaven National Laboratory is Long Island? Because, good old J.P. Morgan gave him most of, North Shore, Eastern, and from Queens up to where the fish splits, where Shelter Island is. All of that, you know, Tesla turned into a phased array radar. And he did stuff that in Shoreham, where they built the Long Island Mining Company's Shoreham Power Plant, right on the freaking footprint of Tesla's Warden Cliffs facility. And it was an experiment. He experimented out there in Colorado Springs. That sucker was a industrialized size to show that we can send electricity everywhere without wires, because we're already kind of, you see those big electric towers, the 3 wires, right? Those wires don't carry the current. They are wave guides. That's why they call them transmission lines. They are transmitting the current, right? Well, Tesla, after that, learned how to discreetly send that current anywhere on the planet, right? And so he invented drones, right? Little drone submarines that he was going to sprinkle all over the coastline of the United States that would just sit out there. And if any boat came into towards our waters that weren't our friend, these little drones would go up and sink them. And they didn't have batteries; they had this current. And he put this together and a demonstration and demonstrated it in the 1890s in the New York, in Central Park's boat pond, which was a big pond that, right, anyway. So and you hear about the Philadelphia experiment. That was one of his. All of Manhattan. Why do you think they call it Manhattan Project? Because that's where Tesla was. So this is history that's there if you want to go find it. I a true chucklehead monkey can find this information. So can you. Me, not even work. I mean, well, I did have the auspices of the hidden hand, right? I was one of their what they called itinerant scholars, meaning I was not um, on anyone's payroll, right? I didn't sign anyone. The only thing I ever signed were non-disclosure forms, right? And at a certain point, they didn't even make me do that because they knew I wasn't going to say anything. Because if I did, then I wouldn't have the nice, cushy kind of life that I wanted to have for me. Going around the world, looking at stuff, and that's all I did. I wasn't, I was at CERN. I was at a lot of places, right? But I wasn't one of the boys. They couldn't tell me what to do. I had total access. Couldn't tell me what to do. Yes, most people don't have that. Don't have access to people like. At the CFR, Dr. Quigley, and none dare call it conspiracy. What's his name? And you know, the guy who's taught at John Hopkins, and got a Nobel Prize for finding not 0 point, but the background radiation of the universe, and bringing modern art to that was my mentor. Billy Clover, and Joseph Campbell. I studied at his feet. Most people don't have, and I wasn't a matriculating student. I would, be either given a letter to hand to those guys saying, "Hey, this guy, you might like him. He might be good for you, but he could definitely get a lot from you," right? And so, not many people have that. Right? Not many people, it's part of the Theosophical Society. I also was, my godfather was Cardinal Cushing. I was going to be a rocket scientist for the Pope. And even when I was obvious I was not going to be a priest, that when I was in a seminary, I tried to free it, get everyone to realize that God loved everyone, because they actually had at Canterbury in New Milford, Connecticut, they actually had their own slaves. They had indentured servants there that were there for generation after generation. And most families went along because they were given a nice house. The work wasn't that hard. They had no freedom. Whenever they needed money, they could, whenever they needed medical anything, they had it. But they were slaves, right? And they had kids who were smart. They would, send them to Canterbury, and not as priests, but in Canterbury they had three levels. Going to be a priest, you wore a black cassock. You're going to be a businessman, you wore a three-piece suit. You're going to be a military guy, you were going to be you wore a uniform. And so that was Canterbury. Now Canterbury's just become it was all boys school too, and so they had a thing called fagging, right, which meant the underclass freshmen and sophomores were basically put through a hazing regiment of being a slave. And then when they were junior and seniors, they could do it to the sophomore. So it was to build a psychology of slavery. So that's where we are now, right? And the guys who are at the hidden hand, they are at a loss because they have no one there in their upper echelon. They just have psychos like Jojo the used car salesman and Moron Boy, the TV game show host, and everyone from your dog catcher to above the president are all people who are on the take and who are basically got blackmail on, right? So me, you know, I was one of, but I didn't care, and I would own little guidelines. I wouldn't go. When I remember one time I was invited to go to the Bohemian Grove, and I knew what it was. And I said, I don't think so, you know. And there were, I was part of Theosophical Society. I was part of Thule Society. I was part of the U.S. Psychotronic Society. I was part of the Electric Space Gravitic Corporation. I was parts of all of those things, right? But we were outliers, and we were allowed to exist because we were, doing research and doing things that they wanted to know about. Like when they kept stumbling across elements of what was known as Looking Glass, where they could look in that scene from, and what's his name, the guy who did Gene Roddenberry, who did you know Star Trek. Everything about Star Trek has been allowed to be assimilated into the public, like the first Star Trek with Captain Kirk, and they're going to you know Bones gets jacked up on some drugs and he goes, psychotic and then beams down to this planet. And there's the, time um, Garland and he jumps, they're all there. They're all amazed at it. Spock goes, oh, I've been a jerk. I could have been recording all this the whole time here. And he hits it and he's recording. And then all of a sudden, um, Bones breaks away and jumps through the hula hoop, and instantaneously the stars are different. They try to raise the ship on their smartphone. There's nothing there. I'm scared. I mean, everything has changed because Bones went back into the past and did something stupid, and everything changed. It's a whole new timeline, right? Timeline they're on is gone, but they're still there. So the only thing they can do is jump through the hula hoop, um, you know, and hope because the garland has recycled itself and it's starting again, and so you know Spock has hit on his tricorder. It goes, okay, this is going to be pretty rough, but I can get close to where Moron Boy jumped into the timeline, and so they do too, and they back there during the Depression, and you know the story. So that was that was when one of the first iterations of because they were fooling around with things that they found out there in the Mid East, especially what's his name, Lawrence of Arabia. He wasn't just blowing up railroad tracks. He was a high end scholar, right, making maps, right, and then one the devil found him there and said, hey, don't you want to. And Lawrence, his ego was like, yeah, baby. And so he was from Arabia. Right? But he was one of the first people who, at least the English aristocrats, I mean, but they had it before too. The Knights Templar unearthed a whole bunch of that information. And so the Roman Catholic Church, you think what's underneath the Vatican is mind friggin' boggling, underneath St. Patrick in New York City is similar, right? And they, those little tubes that you um, hear about that Musk is putting together, and you know that's being talked about. Well, it's true, and they do have them, and they can zip from St. Patrick's to the Vatican in the same kind of tube. When you go to the bank and you drive in the drive-in window, and it's got 3 or 4 windows instead of just the one on the side of the building. There's a box. You open it up. This little thing capsule. You stick your check and your deposit slip in there, and you put it in the tube and hit the button, and it sucks it and takes it there. Right. Well, they have those things going all over the place. And before the internet, before microwave, banks and other entities that wanted secure delivery of documents, there are those tubes all over Manhattan. And the people who own it now, it's the mob, and they are circulating, their money that they have to launder. They're circulating drugs. They're circulating everything through those tubes. So of course we have ones big enough that people can get into and zip. You know. So all of this stuff is real. Just start scratching. But you guys are so distracted about what you're going to buy on Amazon and et al. What kind of new shoes you're going to have, and how you're underpaying. I mean, that's why I keep looking at our boy. Let's see what our boy is up to. Right? And John Birmingham, he got a hold of me the other day, and we started talking. He says, "Can I record what you say?" Obviously, he's going to put it on his show and probably even stick it into AI, and give a false representation, maybe. But I have so many shows on YouTube that AI has. I don't have to. Worry about John. I mean, he's already, he's stolen every document that I've ever, like birth certificate, marriage certificates of my grandparents, pictures of my grandparents marrying, a mahogany box that my great grandfather made for his wife for their wedding, and it had pearl in, like, John Boy. Uh, he threw me out. And he had, "Get out now!" And so I didn't have like 2 hours to go through my stuff and take what was. So I just kind of got in my car and drove away. And so, because he was so jacked up on coffee and whatever else, and he had a hammer in his hand, and he said, "I would never hit you with it." But he's like, "Yeah." So I got out of there. And when I came back about a month later, he had rifled through all my stuff and took everything. Right? But one of the good things about that is, by not having any of that, except for a few other documents, I am who I am. You know what I mean? Okay, come on. What am I looking for? I have no idea what I'm looking for. I have to ask God, what am I looking for? Hmm, okay.
What do white people say back then about all this? The Haitian Revolution has been described by scholars as an unthinkable moment, right? Because the Haitian Revolution is not just another slave revolt. There had been slave uprisings happening across the Americas, right? And they're saying, okay, you believe in liberty, you're saying you believe in equality and brotherhood. Well, it turns out we believe in those things for ourselves too. What makes the Haitian Revolution radical is that the revolt turns into a revolution. And so when you look at the very earliest responses by white folks on the ground, they're a little bit like, oh dear, there's sort of troubling news from across the ocean. It's not until this revolt proves itself unstoppable that it then becomes completely terrifying, because in their minds there is the potential that the Haitian Revolution and its success will create a domino effect that'll come to their front door. Exactly. So what we now call Haiti, right, the former French colony of Saint-Domingue,
was hands down the wealthiest colony in the Americas at that time. And there are copycat revolts across the Americas. You know, Martinique goes up in flames, Guadeloupe goes up in flames, Grenada goes up in flames, Jamaica, Antigua, right? Even in what was then Spanish Louisiana. Mm-hmm. So there is a fear that the Haitian Revolution will become an example of what Black sovereignty and equality could look like. So what actions did the white men who were in power in what we now call the United States at that time, what actions did they take in response to that? Well, what we see, I think, first and foremost is a ramping up of policing. The slave patrols are put on alert. They're also surveilling and ramping up their monitoring of free Black communities as well, right? There's concern that alliances would emerge. And of course, in situations where conspiracies are actually revealed, then we see whole new waves of legislation, limiting everything from freedom of movement, denying access to education, implementing new laws that monitor and surveil cultural activities, right? So this is where we start to see drumming disallowed, musical celebrations. There's even laws passed saying that dancing is illegal, expressions or manifestations of Black joy every time white folks perceive that they present a potential danger to the stability of the institution of slavery. Every single imaginable aspect of Black people's lives are policed, surveilled, monitored, and often criminalized. You're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Bruce, and I'm talking to legal scholar and sociologist Dorothy Roberts and historian Leslie Alexander about how ideas that arose during slavery still have consequences today. You know, that pattern that you're describing, Leslie, you make the argument doesn't just...
That and that's this. We did not have municipal police until 19. Like New York City, you know, they had this thing called Tammany Hall. I wasn't elected. That was a bunch of mobsters who ruled New York City from about 1790 until, and still do. They call it the Democratic Party. You know? And the Republican Party was the reformers, right? Anyway, and that's why that reforming attitude was in the DNA of the Republican Party, and that's why they're called rhinos. You know, Republicans in name only, right? So they had to kill that. So that's why they brought Donald Trump in, because whether he wins or loses, there is going to be no difference between JoJo and Donnie, right? Except Donnie lies so much, and he is so mentally, you know, he's not a stable genius. Um, he constantly tells the public what he's going to do. You know, when Jan Honig, you know, Mr. Fox News said, and that's a joke, Fox masturbation said, so people say that you're going to take the government and use it to go after your enemies. And Donnie goes, well, that's right. You know, that's my right. As president, I have the constitutional right to do that, to take the Justice Department and make it my own lawyer. Last time I was there were too many bureaucrats in the way, but now I got my crew. And it's true. He didn't even think he was going to win in 16, right? And then he got in there who was the most prepared person. And like when, you know, the new almost president comes to visit the president, you know, when you know, Trump went to see Donnie, the only thing that Donnie was amazed by, all the stuff that, uh, you know, Obama tried to give him the 411 on, was he went in, he said, toilet, can I use your toilet? And so Donnie got to, you know, go into Obama's private. Only Obama uses his toilet. He used it, and he goes, "Wow, look, he's got a gold toilet, a gold urinal," and he urinates into the gold urinal. And when he comes back, he tells Melania, and then Melania has lunch with Michelle and says, The only thing, Donnie, I asked him what it was like in the White House. What's this? What's that? What? How does he feel about going to be president? All the authority. And the only thing he could talk about that there was a gold urinal in the Oval Office presidential bathroom, and Michelle kind of giggled and she goes, "What's wrong?" She says, "Well, that was Barack's saxophone." I mean, that right there. eh. So, good luck, kids. Luck. Now I live out in the middle of nowhere. I have nothing, and I, only have $400 Social Security. So I'm totally always because I am here only to do. Why I'm doing this show is because God told me to do it, right? And not like, I don't hear voices. John tells me that he hears voices coming through the walls. No, that's sorry, that's not what I have. I have, I think about things, and when I think about it, and it's just straight out of the Bible. When I think about it and go, that's not. And that's see, whenever anything disconnects you from the love of God, that's sin right there. That's the only sin there is, being disconnected. So all this stuff, you're watching porno, jacking off, you're not quite thinking about God. But if you were thinking about while doing it, then it's not that, now don't believe a word I say. Boy. Do, 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 do. Boop, 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 boop. Seeing what Johnny Boy is. Here's Johnny Boy's show, and it says, "I am from Italian royalty, number one. Number two, Irish royalty, number two, God and genius, and the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit comes last in his list there. Oh, here it is, talking to Al Bob about candid life stuff. Let's see what he's got there. Well, there's a picture of him. It looks like he's 110 years old. He's only 40 something, right? And he's constantly having us to look at his junk. I'm sure it's a tiny little worm. Let's see what he says.
$100 help you pay for your everyday expenses like rent, groceries, and bills. Because of the economy, we just passed this legislation to get free money into the hands of nearly every American.
Yeah, right.
1965 and 1990, New York was a pretty amazing place. It's not that way anymore. Now it's all, it's not that way. So that's why I'm not there. Same with Asheville. Between 90 and 98, it was an amazing place. But now it's like, forget about it. There's so many people. And same thing with Ithaca. When I was in Ithaca between 87 and 91, that was an amazing place to see. But now it's not so much. So I have a knack to cruise into places that are amazing when I'm there. And then when I leave, I've touched it in a certain way. And when you go back, it's not the same. So anyway, so God has something for me to do. I have no idea what it is. But right now, I'm doing a lot of nice little things for a lot of different people. And it's really beautiful. And my health is, like very problematic, but it's still, I could be dead, or I could, be in a wheelchair, or I could be blind. I could have, a lot of things, trouble. But I'm also observing and experiencing the falling apart of the medical system in our country. Because I'm right there in the middle of it. So, but I'm very happy to be God's slave. Whatever God wants me to do. But buddy, I'm gonna let you go.
I think that's from Tom.
What?
He thinks in terms of somebody maybe a slave. Because he's like obsessed with like black people. He can't get out of his head.
No, God, I got it out of the Bible. All through Deuteronomy and Numbers, God goes on and on and on about how Israel has, I'm taking care of you. You have to, do what I tell you, and Israel never does. And that's why they always get in trouble. So to be on God's side, you like God, and to be a slave to God is not a difficult thing. It's not like being a black person getting whipped. It's letting God take care of everything. You get your ego out of the way. You just let God take care of it. I've been doing.
Well, so that's Johnny Boy, right? So he, so let's see what he said about his most recent one about I'm from Italian royalty and God and Jesus, Holy Spirit.
I'm John Birmingham. Hello. Hi. I feel pretty good. Okay. This is this amazing news I found out about me. So, I already knew, but I didn't put two and two together somehow in my mind. It must have been leaning on my face. I don't know, it was like leaning on my face. So, in my DNA, when you go back on my, actually on my great grandmother's side, my grandfather's mother, she was Italian royalty. So that's pretty cool. So it's in my royalties in my actual DNA. It's really cool, and it wasn't too far back. It was literally my great grandmother.
So royalty are genetic markers of Satan.
I don't know exactly.
So John is
I think she was a princess,
proud of
but I
his
don't know.
satanic
I think she wasn't a princess.
background.
I don't know, but I know some
Queen
kind
of
of
England.
royalty. So that's
Go
like really
ask David
cool.
Icke.
That's like really cool.
What the Queen and
And
the Queen's family.
Look how strong and good looking and godly I am, because God blessed me with feeling good. That's the miracle. So God sometimes tells us these amazing things and makes everything okay. And we may suffer for 8 years or 3 years or something like that and think, how is it ever going to be okay? And then it gets okay again. It's a miracle. So that's the good thing. And this is a good thing about Danica, who I got married to and made kids with. What are these headphones doing here? Danica, who I got married to and made kids with, in her DNA, well, her ancestry, it goes.
So, if you think everything's about your life, right? It's not. It's about the we and me. It's about, and being a slave to God is the best thing you can be, because basically it allows you not to always have to be so idiosyncratic, right? And you don't have to kill people. You don't have to start wars. You don't have to be, an imperialist capitalist, that is, I had Italian noble, no, we're all noble in God's eyes. We don't need to have some outside authority to say that you're noble. So you can steal and rape and pillage and kill, because that's what the nobility has done all through human history. That is one of the talking to Adam and Eve about. Oh, you're not going to die, come on, just eat that apple. That's the knowledge of good and evil. And people realized, or thought they did, that evil was something that they could use to be better, about themselves. Anyway, so what? Let's see. Let's get rid of some of this and see what everyone's saying. Jamie, so what do you think so far? It's thank you for your blessings, but what do you think so far about that? We're in a very interesting point in human experience, and it's not like a new point. We've been here over and over and over again, and right now I'm writing on my sixth novel, um, and it's called "Everything's the Same." And it is right. Everything is the same. And like I said, the Unitarian religion basically states that there is no hell, that we're all going to heaven, right? But it's going to take however much time it takes for us to realize that, right? And when we constantly put other authority in front of God, like a religion, you're putting a big, um, roadblock, right? So, um, and the Bible, again, like I said, it was written by thousands of illiterate monkeys at typewriters, um, and basically, the Vatican threw once the Catholic Church kind of split. The guys up there in Constantinople and the guys in Vatican, they started basically the Dark Ages, and it kind of started from them stop buying or getting papyrus, paper from the Mid East, and so no one could write anything down. And then when it wasn't written down, no one could read. Everyone lost the ability to read. We had the Dark Ages, and that's what the Vatican wanted, right? To keep the people stuck. So, and that's where we are right now. We're stuck in our smartphones. We're stuck in our need to look good. I just look the way I look. And if people only knew that I could be gone tomorrow, they might appreciate their sensei Bob a little bit more. I've had a lot of senseis who were looking good one day and keeled over, right? But what did I expect? When they were 140 years old, and like the old crone. Now she didn't keel over; she just went someplace else. She got tired of humanity and left. She was like Elvis leaving the building, right? But she's still around. I get little love notes every now and then. And my other teacher, same thing. Even though when I died, one of my masters, was at my welcome home party, in my life review, right? And he's the guy who said, "Well, you've done really good up till now." What do you mean up till now? Isn't this it? Oh, you think it's it? Is it? Is that what you want? You want to stay in this smelly basement for eternity? All you can smell is vomit and eat vomit. And is that what you want? Yeah, you can have that. Or you can go back and do what you told God you would. I say, I have no idea what I told God I would do. And that is, so you have to be connected to God at all times. You have to be. And it's not like you are special. That is something within all of us mud puppets. We have this, you know, uh, pineal gland, and our hypothalamus, and that's like our third eye, neck of the woods here, right around here, right. But everything from our cerebral cortex down into our central nervous system is just pretty much reptile, and that's what most of humanity lives, a reptile life, right? Until and some, when people are noble, when they have to describe themselves. I am noble, can't you tell by the way I burp? And how about my shit? I'm only shitting in my pants. What do you think about that? And I have slaves that lick it out. And that's what John Birmingham is talking about. He has this nobility that, that's why his toilet is always. I mean, if you go back to seeing some of those, he lived in two different Airbnbs and they threw him out. Not because he was obnoxious or weird or anything like that. It wasn't, he was paying the bills, but he both, he has videos showing he's walking out and these guys are cleaning out the toilet line to his little part of the Airbnb, and they got gigantic piles of crap and toilet paper, like more toilet paper than you can imagine. Every week John would buy like 400 rolls of toilet paper. I mean, was he eating it? I mean, and then when I would take 2 or 3 rolls, what are you doing? Taking my toilet paper? It's like, okay, that's interesting. And that's why I live with John, because A, I do not I A, I don't give up on my friends. B, when I start an interesting project, I do it to its completion, meaning where I can't do anything more. So, John, why don't you come back? We'll be like the old times. Well, I don't want the old times. I'm much happier out here all by myself. All the morons who came and were buzzing around for about 9 to 15 months, they're all gone, right? And the more that are coming in are the natural dynamic here is like so people are chopping down like they're in the last 11 months on the county road, um, going either way, going to Johnson City or going to Boone or going to Asheville. That's the three directions that or Kingsport that road goes to. Just on my little notch of 5 miles, right? Uh, there are 10 new roads going up into these hills, these Sawtooth Mountains, and they're building, cul-de-sacs, not just one house, because they're bringing in three-phase electricity. That's enough electricity for 90,000 people. It used to be what is known as a farmer line with just one wire, right? That's good for about, 2,500 people, but they're bringing enough juice for 90,000 people. And that was going on in places like Weaverville in North Carolina near Asheville and Waynesville when they went from farmer lines to three phase. I said, guys, they're planning to bring 90,000 people into this neck of the woods. Well, I was wrong. They brought in 250,000 people into the Asheville area, the Buncombe County area, the Waynesville area. And it's like the road that used to go to the Asheville airport, and there was no terminal. You just parked your car and walked out on the tarmac. Now it's a big fancy edifice and a 1,200 car parking garage, and the highway to it is 16 lanes. It used to be just a county road, 1925. Now it's 26, and it's 16 lanes. That's how. I mean, because 16 lanes aren't just for the airport; it's for all the houses and cul-de-sacs and shopping centers that they have built all around that area that had nothing in it. So that's what they want to do to this place, and this place is saying, "I don't think so." So we've had probably the rainiest rain that they have had, and they've had to empty our lake 3 times in less than 2 months. They started, February, March. They emptied it 3 times. That's how much rain we had. And each time we had a big rain, like a week and a half ago, we had 28 inches of rain in one night. And so it took those guys about a week and a half to empty the lake. And then it was refilled past to normal things in less than 24 hours. And that's happened 3 times. So you sog out this area so much, and then you tear out trees that hold the water in. We've already had 3 or 4 hills totally slide down into other cul-de-sacs, into brandly made golf courses, and that's caused zillions of dollars. That's why one of the reasons why the insurance around for properties have gone up so much is what has happened here just in 3 years for the rest of the country. It's happening because the mob is dumping their dirty money in here to be laundered, and they don't care that they do this stuff to cause total chaos, but rich people. So around me, the 20 or so folks who came and built stuff, half of that shit, trees have fallen into their houses. So the other houses, whole sides of hills have washed them down. And so the 3 things that happen to these people are either they commit suicide with their own gun. I always wanted to have my own gun. Here I can carry it freely. And this one guy went into a Dollar Tree, right, and he had the sucker stuck in his belt. And when he leaned, he was so fat. When he leaned over, he kind of looked like that picture of John. That was white hair like that, and kind of piggy cheeks. He leaned over, and he was so incontinent, he shit his pants. Gun went off and blew his everything off. Both the business side and the funhouse side of that nether regions, right? I mean, basically blew that part of his gut, from his belly button to about 6 inches above his asshole, blew that off. And his whole insides just emptied out onto the floor of the Dollar Tree. So that's what's going on, kids. Are you ready for that one? It's not going to be, we're already living in the times of living dead. John Birmingham's a perfect example. He is the living dead. Every now and then, that sweet, child of God kind of pops out. But majority of the time, he's like totally. Okay. So what else? Come on. Okay. Let's see if our boy will answer. Come on. There we go.
Hello?
Oh, there he is. How you doing, kiddo? So, what was that? Well, you're not here, but yes, you're on the show.
Okay.
You're on the show.
Let's do a podcast. Let's film a podcast. I got the microphones ready.
Okay, so you did that already with me. I saw you took my voice and put it up on your show.
Yeah, I asked you if that was okay.
Yeah. No, it was okay. I mean, it was more the same. And I was like, in this show, I was talking about instead of doing the same old same, it's time to do something new.
Yeah, a podcast.
Well, what is the difference between a podcast and what I'm doing here on YouTube?
Well, it's very. I know all about filmmaking and a podcast and the various genres of filming and videos and almost anything about like movies, videos, or stuff like that, or if it's a blog, reality, documentary, those are all kind of the same genre.
So you know everything about the film industry?
No, I mean, like, I can tell you what a podcast is.
Okay.
It originated from, like, I think the radio days when Howard Stern started filming his radio show. And on a radio show, they all had microphones they'd talk into with headphones where they could all hear how the radio show was. And they had, go into a mixer and they had like little funny sounds that they could press like to make like somebody shouting or something like that, and they'd have little sound effects or like the big radio show in between before a commercial and stuff like that. And they started filming it, and and that's what the podcast is. So
it doesn't.
It's a higher quality.
It isn't more defined by the genre of the information of like what it is, like a podcast and a YouTube. A YouTube is more informational, like how to fix your carburetor, and the podcast is more about, we're going to talk about slavery today.
Yeah, it's more like a radio show, but like a random video could be, you could go out there in real life and film things, but on a podcast, you can edit in footage of going out there and filming things, so it can be about that too. And pretty much, it's really simple. What a podcast is, really people sitting down, talking into microphones on any subject.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
It's more high quality filmed. It's the same as a video.
Okay.
It's almost the same as a video.
Okay.
It's like the same as any
YouTube.
It's almost the same as any video. It's just that people are sitting in chairs talking into microphones, and you try to stay on like whatever the video subject is that you're talking about, right. Or you can talk for hours and then edit like hundreds of videos maybe that are less than 60 seconds long or like 55 seconds long, and then or longer videos, but I don't know if you can make that many of just a 3 hour show.
So are you recording right now? Are you recording right now? Are we live?
No, I'm just talking into the phone.
Okay.
To you. I'm telling you what a podcast is. So it's not just a trendy thing because it records in high quality. It's a good genre that I think is going to be around in hundreds of years if humans are still alive. unless humans aren't alive, then they will be alive. They'll be in heaven, but I don't know in this life if we'll still be around.
Well, not at the lives that we live now are
Yeah, but it's a
determined by
good genre. It's a
our
good way-
our limited physical ability, that our body, that is just our avatar. It's not really who we are. It's not our soul. Your body isn't your soul. You aren't the body that we see on your
Yeah.
YouTubes. That's not really you. That's just your
Yeah,
body.
our bodies will get old and die,
Right.
and it's not who our soul really
Right,
is.
right.
But it is. But we're in this body. Our souls are part of this body until we die.
Well,
Our souls are like this is how we interact and live.
our body is an avatar to experience what it is to be material in sense. So God can understand the material life, even though He created everything. We are His avatars to see how it works out. That's why we're here, and that's why we are God's slave, because we were created so we can co-create with God love, not money, not fortunes, not fame, not any of
earthly things. Those are called earthly values. Those are looked at. Well, God tells us those are earthly values, and we shouldn't value that the most. We should value God the most. Kindness to others, forgiving others, feeling sorry for the bad that we did.
Well, it's not so much feeling sorry for the bad.
Well, you don't feel sorry for the bad.
To understand.
God does that for you.
To understand what we've done, so we don't do it again. We are meant to experience everything, so we can know what it is, so we can, live our lives in God's unconditional love and not the material realm. Because if you are always feeling guilty, you're never going to, be there for God's unconditional love. You're just going to be there for your guilt.
What does guilt have anything to do with material possessions? Some people who have a bunch of money and stuff are nice and kind and good, and they did. That's just how God gave.
Jesus said, if you want to go to heaven, you got to get rid of all of your stuff.
No, no.
Yes, he did. Yes.
No, that was to follow him. That was back when he was on earth. That was just to follow him.
No, when he rose again from the dead, and he was around for about.
Where's the Bible passage?
Oh, in Luke and in Mark.
Look it up.
Luke
know
and Mark.
The Bible. Because I also know God said to keep the things that you have and don't get rid of them, because you may need them if the end days come at any day. We may need a house that we have.
Where did it say that? Where did it say that? I don't remember seeing anything even close.
Too.
I don't know.
I don't know. The Bible too.
So what neck of the woods did that show up?
He does not say give away everything away. That was only when he was alive. That was a miracle that Jesus, God's Son, was really on earth, and people had a chance to follow him and live for God and Jesus.
You can do that now, John. You're supposed to be doing that now. God is Jesus, God, and Spirit are still on this planet. They're still on this planet, and we can live in that joy, grace, and Spirit if we don't distract ourselves with material things. Now, we live in a material world where, I have clothes, I eat food.
So why should you get rid of those things?
No. See, you didn't hear what I said. And that is, you have to get rid of, that's the main thing. Yes, in this material world, we need to, but John, when I was making money,